down the road, it has never in the history of the world led to deflation.
Well, one of the things that I have looked at as a good investment, I live near the Haynesville Shale natural gas find and the Barnett Shale. This time last year, this economy had high hopes that we would see our economy boom because the landowners would be getting their payments. I still see natural gas as a viable investment going forward. Does China use enough natural gas to really impact demand going forward?
It doesn't matter if China uses zero natural gas. China uses huge amounts of energy. And all energy is competitive one way or the other. I mean, if the price of coal goes up, the price of oil and natural gas will be affected, atomic energy and everything else. So it really doesn't matter. We have shortages of energy developing in the world. The IEA study recently showed that the reserves, world's reserves of oil are declining at the rate of 6.7% a year. But let's suppose they're wrong and they're only declining at the rate of 5 or 4% a year. Well, you can see this world is running out of oil and energy, and so somebody's got to do something quick to solve that problem. The only thing that's going to solve it is higher prices for all forms of energy.
Are you bullish on all commodities at this point, or are you waiting until we get through this period of forced liquidation? And if waiting would be the thing to do, what indicators would you look for? Would you look to the charts, or what's your position on the commodities now?
Well, I know that the supply, what's going on in the world is good for commodities. It's helping commodity fundamentals. Because, right now, many farmers cannot get loans for fertilizer. People are closing mines because the credit lines are being called. So you're having the supply of everything continuing to decrease. I talked about the world's oil reserves before. So what's happening is not good for General Motors or good for Citibank, but it's great for commodities. I didn't say it's great for commodity prices. We said it for the fundamentals of commodities, though. It's great, and commodities will lead in the future because that's the only place I know where the fundamentals are actually being enhanced rather than damaged by what's going on.
Well, that's an excellent point. I've heard many argue that China will China will not quit buying our debt because they really need our demand for their goods. Yet today we see them sign yet another oil deal with Iran, even though Iran has been under scrutiny from the U.S. Is our demand that important to China that they would continue to buy our debt regardless of the shape of our government?
Well, if you've got a brother-in-law, you love your sister, but the guy keeps borrowing money and getting deeper into debt, are you going to continue to lend him money for the rest of his life, the rest of your life? Probably not. Somewhere along the line, even if you have to split with your sister, you're probably going to cut the guy off.
That's
you're going to go broke if you don't. So China's going to slow down their purchases. They may even, I doubt if they'll start selling, but they'll certainly diversify more and more away from the U.S. dollar. Of course, they want to continue to sell products to the U.S., but they can't be totally idiotic about this. They have to deal with their own internal problems, and there's coming a time, which may be now, where they're better off using their own money rather than propping up the dollar and the government bond market in the U.S., using their money to do things at home or for the good of China rather than good for a bunch of turkeys in Washington, D.C.
We've had other guests. Peter Schiff is the most notable on our show that has argued that given everything that's happened in the economy, that the American consumer is done and that the American system is headed for financial collapse. Do you believe that it's that bad in the U.S., or do you think that the American consumer will regain its normal self, so to speak?
Well, when you say normal, I mean right now the savings rate in America is something like 1%. The normal savings rate in America over history has been, from 6 to 10%. So if we go back to normal, we're going to have a long period when people are building up their savings again and getting out of debt. That's going to take a long time, and they're not going to be going down to Sears a lot during that period of time. So whether it's the end of the road for America or not, I'm not smart enough to know right now. I have my views, but who knows? But I do know that the government keeps making mistakes, it's going to make it worse rather than better, and so far they've done nothing but make mistakes.
Well, and you would argue that they should let. I saw last night where they were looking at infusing more money into Bank of America because of the Merrill Lynch deal. You would argue that we need to have a few bankruptcies to clean the system out and start over. Is that correct?
Of course, it's the way it's always worked throughout history. I mean, we've never had a system where people propping up the zombies, the Walking Dead, has revived an economy. Look at Japan for the past 18 years. It's never, ever worked throughout the history of the world, so it's not going to work this time either.
And is the China growth story still intact?
Well, I don't know what you mean by growth. China will have setbacks just as, in the 19th century, America had 15 depressions with a D. Horrible civil war, massacres in the streets, no rule of law. You could buy and sell you could still buy and sell congressmen, but in those days they were cheap. You had few human rights. And yet America, despite all those horrendous setbacks, evolved to be a very successful country in the 20th century. It's going to have the same kind of problems every other country's had. So is the China growth story, as you put it, still intact? In my view, yes. They won't have huge problems too. They can have social disorder just like we did. They can have everything. But as far as I'm concerned, the future is in China rather than elsewhere.
Well, Mr. Rogers, I certainly appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us on Stock Shots tonight.
No problem. Let's do it again.